Think about the last time you had something important to say. Maybe it was a meeting where you needed to convince your team. Maybe it was a conversation where you needed someone to understand you. Maybe it was a moment where everything depended on your words landing exactly right. And then think about what actually happened. Did they listen? Did they really hear you? Or did your message get lost somewhere between your mouth and their mind? Did you walk away frustrated, knowing you had something valuable to offer but couldn't quite make them see it? Here's the truth most people never realize. The difference between being heard and being ignored, between inspiring action and watching nothing change, between commanding respect and being dismissed, it has almost nothing to do with what you know. It has everything to do with how you communicate what you know. Right now, someone with half your expertise is getting twice the influence, not because they're smarter, not because they're more talented, but because they've learned something you're about to discover. They've learned that influence isn't magic, it's structure, it's strategy, it's a set of specific skills you can learn, practice, and master. Over the next hour, everything you thought you knew about communication is going to shift. You're going to learn why the loudest person in the room rarely wins, why silence can be more powerful than words, why clarity builds more trust than any promise ever could, and why the people who truly influence others aren't just talking, they're thinking 3 moves ahead. This isn't theory. This isn't abstract advice you'll forget tomorrow. These are 10 precise skills that will change how people respond to you, starting with your very next conversation. The question is simple. Are you ready to stop hoping your words land and start making sure they do? Let's begin.
Chapter 1. Think before you speak. The structure of influence. There's a moment that happens in every conversation, a split second where you choose your words. Most people rush through it. They say the first thing that comes to mind, hoping it lands well, and sometimes it does. But hope is not a strategy. The people who truly influence others, who command attention and respect without effort, they do something different. They pause, they think, and then they speak with intention. This is not about being slow. It's not about hesitation or uncertainty. It's about control. When you think before you speak, you're building something. You're constructing influence word by word, like an architect designing a building. Every sentence has a purpose. Every phrase moves the listener closer to understanding, agreement, or action. This is the structure of influence, and it begins with a single choice. Most of us were never taught this. We learned to speak as children, mimicking sounds and patterns until words became automatic. By the time we reached adulthood, talking felt natural, effortless. But natural doesn't mean effective. You can speak fluently and still fail to persuade. You can talk for hours and leave people confused. Influence requires more than vocabulary. It requires architecture. Think about the last time someone truly changed your mind about something important. Maybe it was a mentor, a colleague, a friend. What did they do? They didn't overwhelm you with information. They didn't speak louder than everyone else. They chose their words carefully. They built a path for your thoughts to follow. They made it easy for you to see what they saw. That's the difference between talking and influencing. The structure begins with clarity. Before you open your mouth, you need to know what you're trying to accomplish. Are you informing, persuading, motivating? Each goal requires a different approach. When you're unclear about your purpose, your words scatter. They lose power. But when you know exactly what you want to achieve, every sentence becomes a step toward that outcome. Next comes precision. Vague language creates vague results. When you say, "We should probably look into this soon," you're inviting delay and confusion. But when you say, "We need a decision by Friday," you create clarity and urgency. Precision doesn't mean being harsh. It means being clear. It means respecting your listener enough to communicate directly. Then there's timing. The best words at the wrong moment fall flat. You've seen this happen. Someone makes a brilliant point during a heated argument, but nobody hears it because emotions are too high. Or someone pitches a great idea right before lunch when everyone's distracted and hungry. Timing shapes impact. The same sentence can inspire action or get ignored depending on when you say it. Understanding your audience is the foundation of this structure. People listen through their own filters, their own concerns, their own priorities. What matters to you might not matter to them. But if you take a moment to consider what they care about, you can frame your message in a way that resonates. You're not changing what you say, you're changing how you say it so they can actually hear you. This is not manipulation. Manipulation hides truth. Influence reveals it in a way people can accept. When you structure your words with care, you're not tricking anyone. You're helping them understand. You're removing obstacles between your idea and their comprehension. You're making it easier for them to make good decisions. The best leaders, negotiators, and communicators all share this trait. They think before they speak. They build their messages with intention. They understand that words are tools, and like any tool, they work best when used with skill and purpose. This doesn't make communication cold or calculated. It makes it powerful. It makes it effective. It makes it matter. Starting today, you can develop this skill. Before your next important conversation, pause for just 3 seconds. Ask yourself, what do I want to achieve here? What does this person need to hear? How can I say this with clarity and precision? 3 seconds can transform how you communicate. 3 seconds can change how people respond to you. Influence is not a gift. It's not reserved for the naturally charismatic or the extraordinarily articulate. It's a structure. It's a method. And it starts with one simple practice. Think before you speak. Because the moment between thinking and speaking, that tiny space most people ignore, that's where power lives. Chapter 2. Command without volume. The power of composure. There's a strange belief that influence requires force, that to be heard you must be loud, that authority comes from raising your voice until people have no choice but to listen. But walk into any boardroom, any negotiation, any moment of real power, and you'll notice something. The person who commands the room is often the quietest one there. Volume is what people use when they lack conviction. It's a mask for insecurity, a substitute for substance. When you need to shout to be heard, you're not demonstrating strength, you're revealing weakness. Real authority doesn't announce itself, it simply exists, and people feel it without you saying a word. Think about someone you deeply respect. Picture them in your mind. Now ask yourself, do they yell to make their point? Do they overwhelm you with noise? Probably not. They speak with calm certainty. Their words carry weight because they believe what they're saying. And that belief, that composure, it transfers to you. You listen not because you have to, but because you want to. Composure is magnetic. When everyone around you is panicking, escalating, raising their voices in frustration, and you remain steady, something shifts. People start looking to you for guidance. They start trusting your judgment, because composure signals competence. It tells people that you've seen this before, that you know what to do, that you're in control, even when circumstances aren't. This doesn't mean being emotionless. Composure is not the absence of feeling, it's the management of it. You can be passionate without being chaotic. You can be assertive without being aggressive. The key is channeling your emotion into your message, not letting it hijack your delivery. When you speak with controlled intensity, people lean in. When you speak with uncontrolled emotion, they lean back. Consider how you respond when someone yells at you. Your body tenses, your mind shifts into defense mode. You stop listening to their words and start protecting yourself from their energy. Now consider how you respond when someone speaks to you with calm authority. You relax, you open up, you actually hear what they're saying. That's the difference composure makes. The people who command without volume understand this fundamental truth. Influence flows through connection, not domination. When you raise your voice, you create distance. When you lower it, you create intimacy. When you speak with steady confidence, you invite people into your perspective instead of forcing them there. There's a practical element to this as well. In high-stakes situations, composure gives you a critical advantage. While others are reacting emotionally, you are thinking strategically. While they're burning energy on volume, you are conserving it for precision. Composure creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space, you make better decisions. This skill becomes even more powerful in conflict. When someone comes at you with aggression, with raised voices and sharp words, your composure disarms them. You don't match their energy. You don't escalate. You remain grounded, and suddenly they have nothing to push against. Their aggression loses momentum. The dynamic shifts. You're no longer in a battle. You're in a conversation you control. But composure isn't just about how others perceive you. It's about how you perceive yourself. When you train yourself to remain calm under pressure, you build unshakable confidence. You prove to yourself that you can handle difficult moments without falling apart. That internal knowing, that self-trust, it radiates outward. People sense it, and they respond to it. Developing composure takes practice. It starts with awareness. Notice when you feel the urge to raise your voice. Notice when frustration starts creeping into your tone. In those moments, pause. Take one deep breath. Let the emotions settle for just 2 seconds. Then speak. You'll be amazed at how different your words sound, how much more powerful they become. Pay attention to your body as well. Composure lives in your posture, your breathing, your facial expressions. When you're physically tense, your voice reflects it. When you're physically grounded, your voice carries authority. Stand or sit with stability. Breathe from your diaphragm. Relax your shoulders. These small physical adjustments create massive changes in how you sound and how you're received. The ultimate goal is this: to become someone whose quiet words carry more weight than another person's shouts, to walk into chaos and lower the temperature just by speaking with calm certainty, to command respect not through force, but through presence. This is possible for you. Not someday, not after years of training, starting with your very next conversation. Because the truth is simple. Volume gets attention for a moment. Composure commands respect for a lifetime. Choose wisely.
Chapter 3. Words that land. Precision beats eloquence. Beautiful language can be empty. Flowery phrases can obscure meaning. Eloquence can actually work against you if it creates distance between your message and your listener's understanding. The goal is not to impress people with your vocabulary. The goal is to move them with your clarity. Precision is the art of saying exactly what you mean with no wasted words. It's about cutting through the noise and delivering your message so clearly that misunderstanding becomes nearly impossible. When you speak with precision, people don't have to guess what you mean. They don't have to read between the lines. They simply know. Think about the last time someone gave you vague instructions. Maybe a boss said, "Handle this when you get a chance," without defining what this was or when a chance might be. You were left confused, uncertain about priorities, unclear on expectations. Now think about a time someone told you, "Complete the report by Tuesday at noon and email it to these 3 people." The difference is stark. One creates anxiety, the other creates action. Precision eliminates confusion, and confusion is the enemy of influence. Every vague word you use is an opportunity for your message to be misunderstood, diluted, or ignored. When you say, "We should improve our process," you've said nothing useful. But when you say, "We need to reduce response time from 4 hours to 2 hours," you've created a specific, measurable target everyone can work toward. This matters in every context. In leadership, precision gives your team clear direction. In sales, it helps prospects understand exactly what they're buying. In relationships, it prevents the endless cycle of miscommunication and hurt feelings. Precision is respect. It shows you value people's time and attention enough to be clear. But precision doesn't mean being robotic. You're not creating technical manuals. You're having human conversations. The trick is finding words that are both accurate and accessible. You want language that feels natural while carrying crystal clear meaning. This balance is where real skill lives. Consider how different these sentences feel. We need to synergize our bandwidth to optimize deliverables, versus we need to work together to finish this project on time. The second one is precise without being pretentious. It says what needs to be said in words everyone understands. That's the sweet spot. Many people confuse precision with brevity. They think being precise means being short. Not necessarily. Precision means including everything necessary and nothing extra. Sometimes that takes 3 sentences, sometimes it takes 1. The question isn't how long you speak, it's whether every word serves your purpose. Here's a test you can run on your own communication. After you finish speaking, ask yourself, could someone repeat back what I just said? Could they explain it to someone else? If the answer is no, you weren't precise enough. If the answer is yes, you landed your message. Precision also requires you to name things accurately. Don't say pretty soon when you mean by Friday. Don't say most people when you mean 7 out of 10. Don't say significant improvement when you mean 30% increase. Specific language creates specific understanding. General language creates general confusion. There's power in concrete details. When you tell a story or make a point, ground it in specific reality. Instead of saying, this strategy has worked well for successful companies, say, this strategy increased revenue by 40% for 3 companies in the tech sector last year. The second version creates credibility. It gives people something real to hold on to. Precision also means choosing strong verbs. Weak verbs hide meaning. Strong verbs reveal it. We're going to try to improve outcomes is weak. We will increase outcomes is strong. The team should consider making changes is weak. The team will implement changes is strong. Your verb choice signals confidence and commitment. Another aspect of precision is knowing what not to say. Every unnecessary qualifier weakens your message. I kind of think we should maybe consider possibly looking into this. Sounds uncertain and unconvincing. We should investigate this. Sounds decisive and clear. Strip away the hedging language. Trust your point enough to state it directly. Precision takes practice. Most of us learn to pad our language, to soften our statements, to avoid seeming too direct. We say, I was just wondering if maybe, instead of I need. We say, it seems like there might be, instead of there is. These habits feel polite, but they undermine your influence. People respect clear communication more than cushioned communication. Start paying attention to your word choices. When you catch yourself being vague, stop and rephrase. Push yourself to be specific. Name the timeline, state the number, define the expectation. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. That's normal. You're breaking old patterns. But with repetition, precision becomes natural. The leaders and communicators you admire, they've mastered this skill. They don't hide behind fancy language. They don't bury their message in unnecessary words. They say what they mean with clarity and confidence. And that's why people listen. That's why their words create movement. You can develop this same ability. Starting now, commit to precision. Cut the fluff, name the specifics, land your words. Because eloquence might sound impressive, but precision changes minds.
Chapter 4. Think like a strategist. From insight to action. Intelligence without strategy is just interesting conversation. You can have brilliant insights, deep understanding, and sharp analysis, but if you can't translate those thoughts into clear action, they remain trapped in your head. The difference between someone who thinks well and someone who influences well is this: strategy. The ability to turn what you know into what people do. Strategists see the gap between current reality and desired outcome. They don't just identify problems, they map the path to solutions. They understand that knowing what should happen is only the first step. The real work is figuring out how to make it happen, who needs to be involved, and what sequence of actions will get you there. This way of thinking changes how you communicate. When you speak strategically, you're not just sharing information, you're guiding people towards specific conclusions and actions. You're anticipating their questions before they ask them. You're addressing their concerns before they become obstacles. You're building a mental roadmap they can follow. Most conversations lack this strategic structure. Someone identifies a problem, everyone agrees it's bad, and then the meeting ends with vague commitments to do better or look into it. Nothing changes because nobody outlined the actual steps. Strategic thinking prevents this waste. It forces you to move from diagnosis to prescription. Here's how this works in practice. Imagine you notice your team is missing deadlines. A non-strategic response is saying, "We need to improve our time management." A strategic response is saying, "We need to implement a weekly priority check-in every Monday at 9, where each person identifies their top 3 tasks and their deadlines. I'll facilitate the first month, then we'll rotate responsibility." See the difference? One is an observation, the other is a plan. Strategic thinking requires you to ask better questions before you speak. Not just what's wrong, but what specifically needs to change. Not just what should we do, but what's the first action we can take today. Not just who's responsible, but who has the authority and resources to make this happen. These questions force specificity. They prevent the vague agreement that leads nowhere. Another element of strategic thinking is understanding sequence. Not everything can happen at once. Some actions must come before others. When you communicate strategically, you make this sequence clear. You say, "First we do this, which enables us to do that, which creates the foundation for this other thing." You're showing people the path, step by step, so they can see how to move forward. Strategists also think in terms of resources and constraints. They don't propose solutions that require things you don't have. They work within reality while pushing its boundaries. When you think this way, your suggestions become implementable. People can actually do what you're asking because you've considered what's possible given current conditions. This doesn't mean accepting limitations forever. It means being honest about where you are now while working toward where you want to be. Strategic thinking acknowledges we can't hire 10 new people this quarter, but we can automate these 3 processes and free up 15 hours a week. It finds leverage points within constraints. Consider how you currently present ideas. Do you just describe the destination, or do you map the journey? Do you paint the vision without explaining the steps? Strategic communication does both. It shows people the compelling future and the practical path to get there. This combination is irresistible. People can see the goal and believe it's achievable. Strategic thinking also involves anticipating resistance. Every new idea faces pushback. Instead of being surprised or defensive when it comes, expect it, plan for it, address the likely objections in your initial communication. Say, "You might be thinking this will take too much time, but here's how we'll manage that." Or, "This might seem risky, but we'll mitigate that risk by doing this." You're removing obstacles before they solidify. This approach builds tremendous credibility. When you consistently present well-thought-out plans instead of half-formed ideas, people start trusting your judgment. They see you as someone who does the hard thinking work. They're more willing to follow your lead because you've proven you consider angles they might miss. The key to developing strategic thinking is forcing yourself to complete the thought. Don't stop at the insight. Push through to the implications. Ask yourself, if this is true, then what? What should we do differently? What's the first step? Who needs to be involved? What resources do we need? What could go wrong? How do we measure success? Answer these questions before you speak, and your communication becomes exponentially more powerful. This takes mental discipline.
It's easier to share the clever observation and let someone else figure out what to do with it. But that's not influence, that's just commentary. If you want to shape outcomes, you need to think strategically. You need to connect insight to action in a way that makes the path forward obvious. Practice this with every significant conversation. Before you speak, spend 30 seconds thinking strategically. What's the point? What action do I want to create? What's the specific next step? This brief pause transforms your communication from interesting to influential, from insight to actionable. Because ultimately, the world doesn't need more people with good ideas. It needs more people who can turn good ideas into real movement. That's what strategic thinking does, and that's what makes you invaluable.
Chapter 5. Speak to mobilize, turning agreement into execution. Agreement is easy. Action is hard. You've been in countless conversations where everyone nodded, everyone agreed something needed to happen, and then nothing actually happened. This gap between agreement and execution is where most influence dies. The skill that separates impactful communicators from everyone else is the ability to mobilize people, to turn that nod into movement. When you speak to mobilize, you're doing more than sharing information or building consensus. You're creating momentum. You're making it so clear what needs to happen next that inaction becomes harder than action. You're removing the friction between decision and execution. This is a specific, learnable skill. Mobilization begins with urgency, but not false urgency. People can smell manufactured pressure. Real urgency comes from connecting your message to something that genuinely matters. You're not creating arbitrary deadlines. You're showing people why acting now is better than acting later, why delay has real cost. Here's what this sounds like. Instead of, "We should work on this project soon," you say, "If we launch this by the end of the quarter, we capture the holiday market. If we miss that window, we wait another year." You've just made the timeline meaningful. You've connected action to outcome in a way people can visualize. That's mobilizing language. Mobilization also requires clarity about ownership. Vague responsibility creates paralysis. When everyone's responsible, no one is responsible. The phrase, "we need to," sounds collaborative, but it often leads nowhere. Strategic communicators name names. They say, "Sarah, you'll lead this. Marcus, you'll support with data. Kim, you'll handle the client communication." Specific ownership creates accountability, and accountability creates action. But naming ownership isn't enough. You also need to define what success looks like. What does done mean? What's the deliverable? What quality standard should they aim for? When you mobilize people, you're giving them a target they can actually hit. Otherwise, you're sending them into fog, hoping they find their way. Another critical element is removing obstacles before they become excuses. As you communicate, acknowledge the barriers people might face, then address them. Say, "I know you're already managing 3 priorities. Here's what we can defer or delegate to make room for this." When you proactively solve problems, people run out of reasons not to act. Mobilizing language also includes immediate first steps. The human brain struggles with big, undefined tasks, but it's excellent at completing small, clear actions. Instead of ending your message with, "Let's improve our customer service," end with, "Today, before you leave, email me 3 specific pain points customers mentioned this week." You've just created an easy entry point. Action has begun. Consider how you close conversations. Most people end with, "Sounds good," or "Let's touch base later." These endings dissipate energy. Mobilizing closes sound different. They sound like, "So you'll draft the proposal by Wednesday, I'll review it Thursday, and we'll send it Friday. Agreed?" You're confirming commitment. You're creating a contract, even an informal one. There's an emotional component to mobilization as well. People act when they feel something, not just when they understand something. As you communicate, tap into emotion.
Show them what success will feel like. Help them picture the positive outcome. Make the future state compelling enough that they want to move toward it. But balance that optimism with realism. If you only paint rosy pictures, people become skeptical. Acknowledge that execution will require effort, that challenges will emerge, but convey confidence that those challenges are manageable. This combination, hopeful but honest, creates motivated action. Mobilization also depends on your own conviction. If you're uncertain or tentative, people will match your energy. But when you speak with absolute clarity about what needs to happen, people catch that certainty. It's contagious. Your confidence becomes their confidence. Your momentum becomes their momentum. Watch what happens when you add these elements together. Clear ownership, specific deliverables, addressed obstacles, immediate first steps, confirmed timelines, emotional connection. Suddenly, agreement transforms into execution. The meeting doesn't end with vague commitments. It ends with people already moving. This is not about being pushy or controlling. It's about being clear and facilitative. You're making it easier for people to act, not forcing them to. You're removing the ambiguity that typically stalls progress. Most people want to contribute meaningfully. They want to make progress, but they need clear direction. That's what mobilizing communication provides. Here's your challenge. In your next important conversation, don't settle for agreement. Push through to mobilization. Before the conversation ends, establish who's doing what by when. Confirm the first specific action. Address at least one likely obstacle. Make execution the path of least resistance. You'll notice an immediate difference. Fewer follow-up conversations needed, less confusion about next steps, more actual progress between meetings. This is the power of speaking to mobilize. It's the difference between talking about change and creating it. Because in the end, the world doesn't reward good intentions or enthusiastic agreement. It rewards execution. And execution begins with someone who knows how to turn a conversation into coordinated action. That someone can be you.
Chapter 6. The Hidden Message. What you don't say controls the room. Every conversation has two layers. There's what you say, the actual words that leave your mouth, and there's what you don't say, the unspoken context, the pauses, the body language, the implications hanging in the air. Most people focus entirely on the first layer. They craft their sentences, choose their words, and think that's communication. But the real power lives in the second layer, in what you deliberately leave unsaid. Silence is not the absence of communication, it's a different form of it. When you pause before answering, you're communicating thoughtfulness. When you let a statement hang without rushing to fill the space, you're communicating confidence. When you choose not to respond to provocation, you're communicating control. These unspoken messages often carry more weight than your actual words. Think about negotiations. The skilled negotiator doesn't immediately respond to every offer. They pause, they create space. In that silence, the other person starts to doubt, to reconsider, to reveal more than they intended. The pause becomes pressure without a single word being said. That's the hidden message working. Or consider leadership moments. When a team member presents a mediocre idea, an inexperienced leader might immediately criticize or correct, but a skilled leader might simply ask a single question and then go quiet. That silence invites reflection. The team member often realizes the gap in their thinking without being told directly. The lesson lands deeper because it wasn't delivered, it was discovered. What you choose not to say also shapes how your words are received. If you don't justify or over-explain your decisions, you communicate authority. If you don't apologize when you haven't done anything wrong, you communicate self-respect. If you don't fill every pause with nervous chatter, you communicate composure. These omissions are strategic. They're deliberate choices that amplify your influence.
Body language operates in this hidden layer too. You can say, "I'm listening," while checking your phone, and the hidden message contradicts your words. You can say, "I'm confident in this plan," while fidgeting and avoiding eye contact, and people will believe the hidden message, not the spoken one. What you don't say with your body speaks louder than your sentences. The same applies to tone and pacing. You can deliver bad news with steady calm, and the hidden message is, "This is manageable." You can deliver good news with anxious energy, and the hidden message is, "I'm not sure this is real." Your delivery system, the how of communication, carries as much information as the content itself. There's profound power in knowing when not to speak at all. In meetings, the person who talks the least often holds the most power. Why? Because restraint signals value. It says, "I only speak when I have something worth saying." When you do speak, after careful silence, people lean in, they pay attention. Your words carry weight precisely because you've been selective about using them. This doesn't mean being withholding or manipulative. It means being intentional. Ask yourself before speaking, is this necessary? Will this add value? Am I speaking because I have something important to say, or because I'm uncomfortable with silence? That filter dramatically improves your communication effectiveness. Consider what happens when you don't defend yourself against every criticism. Someone takes a shot at your idea, and instead of immediately arguing back, you simply acknowledge their point and move on. The hidden message is, you're secure enough not to need constant validation. You're focused on outcomes, not ego. That composure is more persuasive than any defense you could mount. The same principle applies to not needing the last word. When you can end a discussion without making one final point, without ensuring your perspective is the last thing heard, you demonstrate maturity and confidence. The hidden message is, I don't need to dominate this conversation to feel good about my contribution. There's also power in not over-promising. When you commit to something, keep it simple and clear. Don't add extra assurances or elaborate promises. "I'll have this done by Tuesday" is more powerful than "I'll definitely, absolutely have this done by Tuesday. I promise, you can count on me." The second version, despite having more words of commitment, actually communicates less confidence. The hidden message of simplicity is certainty. Pay attention to what influential people leave out of their communication. They don't over-explain their expertise. They don't constantly seek validation. They don't fill every gap with words. They trust that less can be more. That omission can be as strategic as inclusion. You can start practicing this immediately. In your next conversation, resist the urge to fill every silence. Let pauses exist. Watch what happens. You'll notice people become more thoughtful in their responses. They reveal more. They take your words more seriously. The hidden message of your composure changes the entire dynamic. Also, practice selective disclosure. You don't need to share every thought or qualification. You don't need to explain all your reasoning. Sometimes, stating your conclusion with quiet confidence is more effective than walking people through every step of how you got there. The hidden message is, your thinking is solid enough not to require constant justification. This is advanced communication. It requires you to be comfortable with what you're not saying. It requires you to trust that the space you create has value. It requires you to believe that your presence, your composure, your selective silence, these things influence outcomes just as much as your words. Because here's the truth. People are always reading between the lines. They're always picking up on the unspoken. You can't control whether they notice the hidden messages, but you can control what those messages say. And when you master this layer of communication, when you learn to speak through what you don't say, you unlock a level of influence most people never access. The room isn't controlled by the person who talks the most. It's controlled by the person who understands that every silence, every pause, every omission is a choice, and those choices, the ones you don't hear, often matter most.
Chapter 7. Clarity builds credibility. Why trust follows precision. Trust is fragile. You can spend months building it and lose it in a single unclear statement. When people don't understand you, they don't just feel confused. They feel uncertain about whether they should believe you at all. Clarity and credibility are inseparable. Every time you communicate with precision, you make a deposit in your credibility account. Every time you're vague or ambiguous, you make a withdrawal. Think about the people you trust most in your professional life. Chances are they share a common trait. They're clear. When they explain something, you understand it. When they make a commitment, you know exactly what to expect. When they give you information, you can rely on it. That clarity is not a personality trait, it's a communication skill, and it creates trust. Now think about people you've doubted or avoided. Often, it's not because they're dishonest, it's because they're unclear. They speak in generalities, they shift their positions, they say one thing that sounds like it could mean 3 different things. That ambiguity creates suspicion, even when there's no malice behind it. Your brain interprets unclear as untrustworthy. This connection makes sense from a survival perspective. Clarity signals competence and honesty. When someone can explain something clearly, it suggests they actually understand it. When they're precise about commitments, it suggests they intend to follow through. When their message is consistent, it suggests they're being truthful. Your subconscious uses clarity as a proxy for trustworthiness. The reverse is also true. When someone can't give you a straight answer, your internal alarm system activates. You wonder what they're hiding. When someone changes their story or speaks in confusing jargon, you question their competence or motives. Lack of clarity creates doubt, even when doubt isn't warranted. This is why precision is not just about efficiency, it's about credibility. Every time you force yourself to be specific, to name the number, to state the timeline, to define the outcome, you're demonstrating that you're worthy of trust. You're showing that you're not trying to hide behind vague language. You're putting yourself on the record. Consider 2 ways of responding when someone asks if you can meet a deadline. First response, I'll do my best to get it done around that time. Second response, yes, I'll have it done by 5 p.m. on Thursday. The first response might feel safer because it builds in wiggle room, but what it actually does is erode trust. The person now has to guess, follow up, and worry. The second response might feel riskier because you're making a clear commitment, but it builds credibility. The person knows exactly what to expect. Clarity also builds trust because it's rare. Most communication is cluttered with qualifiers, hedges, and unnecessary complexity. When you cut through that and speak with direct precision, you stand out. People remember you as someone who tells it straight. That reputation becomes self-reinforcing. They seek you out because they know they'll get clear answers. This doesn't mean being blunt or harsh. You can be both clear and kind. You can deliver difficult messages with precision while still showing empathy. The goal isn't to be cold, it's to be understood. And when people feel understood, when they feel you've communicated honestly and clearly, they trust you more, not less. There's a specific kind of clarity that builds exceptional trust, admitting what you don't know. When you say, I don't have that information yet, but I'll find out and tell you by tomorrow, you're being precise about your knowledge gap. That honesty enhances credibility. Contrast that with someone who gives a vague non-answer to hide their ignorance. You immediately trust them less. Consistency amplifies this effect. When your message stays clear and stable over time, trust deepens. People can predict how you'll respond. They understand your standards. They know what you stand for. That predictability, built on clear communication, is the foundation of reputation. And reputation is trust at scale. The opposite destroys credibility quickly. If you say one thing in one meeting and something slightly different in another, people notice. They might not call you out directly, but they file that inconsistency away. Do it enough times and they stop believing you entirely. Clarity requires coherence across contexts. You can test your own clarity with a simple exercise. After you communicate something important, ask the person to summarize what they heard. If they can't do it accurately, you weren't clear enough. That's not their failure, it's yours. Take responsibility for ensuring your message lands with precision. Another test, can you write down your key message in one clear sentence? If you can't, you probably aren't communicating it clearly in conversation. This discipline, forcing yourself to distill your point to its essence, dramatically improves how others receive you. Building credibility through clarity is particularly important in crisis or uncertainty. When things are chaotic, people desperately want clear information. They want to know what's happening, what it means, and what to do. If you can provide that clarity when others are floundering, you become the person everyone turns to. Your credibility skyrockets. But this also means you have to resist the temptation to pretend you have clarity when you don't. False certainty is worse than admitted uncertainty. If the situation is genuinely unclear, say so. Explain what you do know and what you're still figuring out. That honest clarity maintains trust. Pretending to have answers you don't have destroys it. Start building this habit today. Before you communicate anything important, ask yourself, is this clear? Could someone misunderstand this? Am I hedging when I should be direct? Am I being specific or vague? Then adjust. Push yourself towards precision. It might feel uncomfortable at first. You might worry you're being too direct or too specific, but watch what happens. People will start trusting you more. They'll seek your input more often. They'll follow your guidance more readily. Because at the end of the day, trust is earned through repeated demonstrations of clarity. Every precise statement is a promise kept. Every clear explanation is proof of competence. Every consistent message is evidence of integrity. Clarity doesn't just help people understand you, it helps them believe in you. And belief, that's the currency of real influence.
Chapter 8. The Strategic Use of Silence, When Less Dominates More. Most people are terrified of silence. In conversations, in presentations, in negotiations, they feel compelled to fill every gap with sound. They interpret silence as awkwardness, as failure, as something to be fixed immediately. But the people who truly control conversations understand something different. Silence is not emptiness, it's power. And when used strategically, it dominates in ways words never can. Think about the last time someone asked you a difficult question and then simply waited for your answer without adding anything else. That silence probably felt heavy. It created pressure. You felt compelled to fill it, to respond, to break the tension. That's the power of strategic silence. It transfers pressure from the person asking to the person answering. It creates space that demands to be filled, usually with truth. This technique is particularly effective in negotiation. When someone makes you an offer, instead of immediately accepting or countering, you pause. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. You let the silence sit. In that gap, something interesting happens. The other person starts to doubt their position. They often revise the offer before you even respond. They've negotiated against themselves, and you didn't say a word. That's strategic silence at work. Silence also creates emphasis. When you make an important point and then stop talking, you give that point room to breathe. You let it sink in. If you immediately move to your next idea, you dilute the impact. But if you pause after stating something significant, you signal to your listener, this matters, pay attention. The silence underlines your words better than any repetition could. In leadership, silence is how you invite others to think. When someone brings you a problem and immediately asks what to do, an instinctive response is to solve it for them. But that creates dependency. A strategic approach is to ask a clarifying question and then go silent. Let them work through their own thinking. That pause, uncomfortable as it may feel, creates space for growth and ownership. There's a specific kind of silence that commands respect, the refusal to defend yourself against every accusation or criticism. When someone attacks your idea or questions your decision, the instinct is to immediately push back with explanations and justifications. But sometimes the most powerful response is a brief acknowledgement followed by silence. I hear your concern, and then nothing else.
That restraint demonstrates confidence. It says you don't need to convince everyone. That security is magnetic. Silence also functions as a filter. When you're about to respond emotionally, that 3-second pause before speaking can completely change your message. In that gap, you regain composure. You think strategically instead of reacting reflexively. What you end up saying is exponentially more effective than what you would have said without the pause. The silence saves you from yourself. Consider the impact of silence in presentations. Many speakers fear even brief pauses, worried they'll lose the audience's attention. But the opposite is true. Strategic pauses give your audience time to absorb complex ideas. They create rhythm. They build anticipation. A well-placed silence makes people lean in, wondering what comes next. It's dramatically more engaging than constant talking. There's also power in the silence of not speaking at all when others expect you to. In meetings where everyone feels obligated to contribute, the person who only speaks twice but says something genuinely valuable is often the most influential person in the room. Their restraint makes their words matter more. Their silence is strategic positioning. This doesn't mean being passive, it means being selective. It means understanding that your attention is valuable and you choose where to invest it. When you speak less frequently, each instance carries more weight. People start to anticipate your input. They actively want to hear what you think because they know it won't be filler, it will be substance. Silence can also be an answer in itself. When someone asks an inappropriate question or makes an unreasonable demand, sometimes the best response is a calm, steady look and no words at all. That silence communicates volumes. It says, "I'm not engaging with that," without needing to justify or explain. It maintains your dignity while making your boundary crystal clear. In conflict, strategic silence can de-escalate when words would inflame. When someone is angry and speaking emotionally, jumping in with your own words usually escalates the situation. But if you remain quiet, if you let them exhaust their emotion without interruption, something shifts. The anger runs out of fuel. Space opens for actual dialogue. Your silence created that possibility. The key is intentionality. Random silence is just awkwardness. Strategic silence is purposeful. Before you use it, know what you're trying to accomplish. Are you creating emphasis, building tension, inviting reflection, demonstrating composure, transfer pressure? Your intention shapes how long you pause and what you do next. You can start practicing this immediately. In your next conversation, when you finish making a point, resist the urge to keep talking. Count 3 seconds in your head. Let the silence exist. Notice what happens. Often, the other person will engage more deeply with what you said. They'll ask better questions. They'll reveal more of their thinking. Your silence created that space. Also, practice pausing before you respond to questions. Just 2 seconds. That brief gap makes your answer sound more thoughtful and considered. It signals that you're genuinely processing the question rather than firing off a rehearsed response. That perception of thoughtfulness enhances your credibility. The ultimate mastery is becoming comfortable with silence, not needing to fill it, not interpreting it as failure or awkwardness, recognizing it as a tool, as powerful as any words you could say. When you reach that comfort level, your entire communication dynamic changes. You move from reactive to strategic, from filling space to creating space. Because here's what most people don't understand. Conversations aren't won by whoever talks the most or the loudest. They're won by whoever controls the rhythm and flow. And silence, strategic and intentional, is how you establish that control. When you master the pause, when you understand that saying nothing can be the most powerful move available, you access a dimension of influence most people never discover. The room doesn't belong to the person who talks constantly. It belongs to the person who knows when silence speaks louder than words. Be that person.
Chapter 9. Read the room. Adapt in real time without losing authority. The message that works for one audience fails with another.
The tone that inspires your team might alienate your clients. The detail level that satisfies your boss might bore your colleagues. Effective communication isn't about having one perfect style. It's about reading the room and adapting in real time while maintaining your core authority and message. This is high-level skill, and it's the difference between influence that lasts and influence that evaporates the moment the context shifts. Reading the room starts with observation. Before you speak, scan the environment. What's the energy level? Are people engaged or distracted? Anxious or relaxed? Formal or casual? These cues tell you how to calibrate your approach. If you walk into a tense room with high-energy optimism, you'll lose people immediately. If you bring excessive gravity to a relaxed setting, you'll seem out of touch. Your starting point has to match the room's reality. But matching doesn't mean mirroring exactly. You're not trying to become whoever they want you to be. You're adjusting your delivery while maintaining your core message and authority. Think of it like translation. The underlying meaning stays the same, but you present it in a language your specific audience can receive. Watch for microsignals as you speak. Are people nodding? That's engagement. Are they checking phones? That's disconnection. Are they leaning forward? That's interest. Are they crossing their arms? That's resistance or discomfort. These signals tell you whether your current approach is working. The key is noticing them in real time and adjusting before you lose the room entirely. Sometimes the adjustment is about pacing. If you sense people are getting lost in complex information, slow down. Add an example. Check for understanding. If you sense they're getting bored with too much detail, accelerate. Get to the point. The same content delivered at different speeds lands completely differently. Other times, the adjustment is about tone. Maybe you started with a serious, data-driven approach, but realized this audience responds better to storytelling and emotion. Mid-conversation, you can shift, share a relevant story, connect to values instead of just facts. The core message doesn't change, but the delivery does. That flexibility dramatically increases your impact. Reading the room also means recognizing when to stop talking. You might have planned to make 5 points, but after 3, you can tell you've achieved your goal. The room is with you. People are ready to act. If you keep talking, you risk diluting what you've already accomplished. The skill is recognizing that moment and having the discipline to end there, even if you had more to say. This is particularly crucial in presentations. You can have a perfect script, but if the audience isn't responding well 15 minutes in, continuing with your plan is a mistake. Skilled presenters adjust on the fly. They skip sections that aren't landing. They expand on parts that generate energy. They answer unspoken questions they see on people's faces. That responsiveness keeps engagement high. The challenge is adapting without appearing inconsistent or weak. If you change your position based on every reaction, you seem unreliable. If you change your core message to please everyone, you stand for nothing. The key is distinguishing between your non-negotiables and your flexible elements. Your core message, values, and key points are fixed. Your delivery style, examples, and emphasis areas are flexible. For instance, if you're communicating a difficult decision, the decision itself doesn't change based on the room's reaction. That's your non-negotiable. But how you explain it, what concerns you address first, what level of detail you provide, these things can absolutely adapt to what the room needs. You're being responsive without being weak. Reading the room also involves recognizing power dynamics. If you're speaking to senior leadership, they likely want conclusions and recommendations, not exhaustive background. If you're speaking to your team, they might need that background to understand why something matters. Same information, different framing. Adapting to who holds power and what they care about is strategic, not spineless. Cultural awareness fits here too. Different cultures have different communication norms around directness, hierarchy, emotion, and pacing. When you're speaking across cultures, reading these expectations and adjusting your style shows respect and sophistication. It doesn't mean abandoning your authenticity. It means presenting your authentic self in a way that can be received. There's a specific skill in recovering when you've misread the room. Maybe you made a joke that fell flat. Maybe you went too deep into technical details too fast. The moment you realize your approach isn't working, acknowledge it and adjust. A simple, let me come at this from a different angle, resets the dynamic.
People appreciate the responsiveness. It builds connection rather than eroding authority. Practice this awareness in low-stakes situations first. In casual conversations, start paying attention to subtle feedback signals. Notice when people's eyes glaze over. Notice when they suddenly perk up. Notice what topics create energy and which ones don't. Build your observation muscle so that when the stakes are high, reading the room becomes automatic. Another practice is preparing multiple ways to explain your key points. Before an important communication, think through different angles, examples, and framings for your core message. Then, depending on how the room responds, you have options ready. You're not scrambling to adjust, you're smoothly pivoting to a prepared alternative. The goal is confident flexibility. You walk in knowing your message and your purpose. You're clear on what matters, but you're also open to discovering the best way to land that message with this specific group in this specific moment. That combination of clarity and adaptability is extraordinarily powerful. Because ultimately, communication isn't about you performing your perfect routine. It's about creating understanding and action in your audience. If your approach isn't working, continuing it out of stubbornness or attachment to your plan is ego, not effectiveness. The communicators who truly influence are the ones who care more about impact than about being right about their method. Read the room. Adjust with intelligence and purpose. Stay rooted in your core message while being flexible in your delivery. This is how you maintain influence across different contexts, different audiences, different situations. This is how you become someone who can walk into any room and connect, who can speak to anyone and be heard. Not because you're everything to everyone, but because you're observant, strategic, and skilled enough to meet people where they are while guiding them where they need to go.
Chapter 10. Train until automatic. Influence as a skill, not a talent. There's a myth that needs to die. The myth that influence is a gift, something you're either born with or you're not. That some people are naturally charismatic, naturally persuasive, naturally able to command attention, and the rest of us are stuck wishing we had that magic. This belief is comforting because it removes responsibility. If influence is innate, you can't be blamed for lacking it. But it's also disempowering. It suggests you're limited by biology or luck, and it's completely false. Influence is a skill, like playing piano, like shooting a basketball, like writing code. Nobody is born knowing how to do these things well. They develop competence through deliberate practice, through repetition, through feedback and adjustment. The same applies to communication and influence. What looks like natural talent is usually thousands of hours of practice that you didn't see. Think about someone you consider naturally influential. Now consider how many conversations they've had in their life, how many presentations, how many meetings, how many times they've had to persuade, explain, negotiate, and lead. That volume creates competence. They've practiced influence more than most people practice anything. The appearance of ease comes from repetition, not from genetics. The good news is that you can close this gap faster than you think. You don't need 10,000 hours to dramatically improve your influence. You need intentional practice focused on the right elements. You need to stop communicating on autopilot and start training specific skills with deliberate attention. Start with one skill at a time. Maybe this week you focus entirely on precision. Every time you communicate something important, you force yourself to be specific. Name the number, state the timeline, define the outcome. You catch yourself being vague and correct it in real time. That focused repetition builds the neural pathway. Precision starts becoming automatic. Next week, maybe you work on strategic silence. You practice pausing before you respond. You resist filling every gap with words. You let important points breathe. At first, this feels uncomfortable, unnatural, but with repetition, it becomes your normal rhythm. The discomfort fades, the power remains. The key is isolating skills and drilling them. Trying to improve everything at once leads nowhere, but picking a specific element and practicing it intensely for a defined period creates real change. After several weeks of this focused approach, you've upgraded multiple aspects of your communication. The compound effect is dramatic. Recording yourself is invaluable. Audio or video, it doesn't matter. Just capture yourself communicating in various contexts. Then review it with ruthless honesty. Where did you lose clarity? Where did you talk too much? Where did you miss opportunities to create impact? This feedback loop, seeing yourself as others see you, accelerates improvement more than almost anything else. Seek real-world practice constantly. Every conversation is an opportunity to apply these skills. That meeting you're dreading, it's a training ground for composure under pressure. That presentation you have to give, it's a chance to practice strategic silence and precision. Reframe these moments from obligations to opportunities. You're not just getting through them, you're using them to build mastery. Study people who communicate exceptionally well, but don't just admire them, analyze them. What specifically do they do that creates impact? How do they structure their points? How do they use their voice? How do they handle resistance? Break down their technique into components you can practice. Influence is reverse engineerable once you know what to look for. Get feedback from people you trust. After important conversations, ask someone who observed what worked, what didn't, where did I lose clarity, where did I create impact. Most people never get honest feedback on their communication. They keep repeating the same patterns, effective and ineffective, because nobody tells them what's actually landing. Break that cycle. Actively seek input. Read your communication when possible. Before hitting send on an important email, read it out loud. Does it sound like how you want to come across? Is it clear and precise? Does it mobilize or just inform? This simple practice, hearing your written words, reveals weaknesses you'd otherwise miss. You catch yourself being vague, overly apologetic, or unnecessarily complex, then you fix it before it goes out. Physical practice matters too. If you have an important presentation or conversation coming up, practice it out loud. Not just thinking through what you'll say, actually speaking the words, multiple times. This builds familiarity and reduces anxiety. It helps you discover which phrases work and which don't. By the time the real moment arrives, your communication flows because you've already done it several times. Embrace discomfort as part of the process. When you push yourself to be more direct than feels natural, when you force yourself to pause when you want to keep talking, when you speak up when you'd rather stay quiet, you're in the growth zone. That discomfort is evidence that you're training. Champions in any field spend most of their practice time being uncomfortable. Communication is no different. Track your progress. Keep a simple log of situations where you applied these skills and what resulted. Over time, you'll see patterns. You'll notice that precision led to faster decisions, that strategic silence created better negotiations, that reading the room prevented conflicts. This evidence builds confidence and reinforces the behaviors you're developing. Understand that mastery isn't perfection. Even highly influential communicators have off days, conversations that don't go well, moments where they wish they'd said something differently. The goal isn't flawlessness, it's consistent competence. It's having these skills available to you most of the time, especially when it matters most. Also, recognize that different contexts might require different skills. You might be excellent at one-on-one communication, but struggle with presentations, or great at written communication, but less effective verbally. Identify your specific gaps and target your practice accordingly. Broad improvement comes from addressing specific weaknesses. The timeline for this transformation is shorter than you expect. If you commit to deliberate practice, you'll notice meaningful change within weeks. Within months, people will start commenting on how you've changed, how you seem more confident, how you communicate more effectively. Within a year of focused effort, you can develop influence that rivals people you currently admire. But here's the critical part. You have to believe this is possible. If you hold on to the belief that influence is fixed, that you are who you are, your brain won't put in the effort.
You'll practice half-heartedly and quit when it gets uncomfortable. But if you genuinely believe that influence is trainable, that you can build these skills through deliberate practice, everything changes. Your brain engages fully. It seeks improvement. It persists through difficulty. This is your choice. You can continue communicating the way you always have, getting the results you've always gotten, or you can commit to training these skills with intention and discipline. You can transform how people receive you, how they respond to you, how they trust and follow you. That transformation is available, not someday, starting right now. Because in the end, influence isn't magic, it's method. It's not luck, it's learning, and you have everything you need to master it. The question isn't whether you can, the question is whether you will. Whether you'll put in the focused practice required to move from where you are to where you want to be. The skills are in your hands now. The principles are clear. The path is mapped. All that remains is the doing. Train deliberately, practice relentlessly, adjust constantly, and watch as influence, real influence, becomes not something you wish you had, but something you simply are. Your communication will never be the same, and neither will your impact.